I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Park Ridge Park District Board of Commissioners. Today is Thursday, October 17th, and it's 6:03. Let's rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
Commissioner Coyne?
Here.
Commissioner Grau?
Here.
Commissioner Leduc? Here. Commissioner Leach?
Here.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Here.
Commissioner Tunnel?
Here.
Commissioner Harrington?
Okay, would anyone like to add, amend, or delete an item to the current agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to public comment on non-agenda items. Moving on to approval of minutes. I move to approve the regular board meeting minutes of Thursday, September 19th, 2019, and Thursday, October 3rd, 2019.
Second.
Any comments? Okay. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. Report of park officials. I'm standing in for Harmony, who's out due to a death in the family. On behalf of Harmony, I move to cancel the November 7th, 2019 regular board meeting and call for a special board meeting to be held on Tuesday, November 12th, 2019 at 7 p.m. at the same meeting location.
Second.
Any discussion?
No.
Roll call vote.
Commissioner Coyne?
Aye.
Commissioner Grau?
Aye. Aye.
Commissioner Leduc?
Yes.
Commissioner Leach?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Yes.
Commissioner Tunnel?
Yes.
Commissioner Harrington?
Okay. And standing in for the president, I call for a special board meeting on Thursday, November 14th, 2019 at 7 p.m. at the O'Connor Building at Prospect Park for presentations and discussions on lawn care practices, and no other business will be conducted.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay. We'll call the vote. We're calling it. We're having it. Thank you. All right. Attorney Hoffman. All right. Executive Director Mountcastle.
The only thing I want to mention is a thank you to all the staff for all their hard work and preparations on the budget, led by Superintendent DeAngelis, and thank the board for your patience and for your time as we go through this tonight. And that is all I have, unless there's any other questions for me or on marketing or human resources. I'd be happy to answer.
I guess not. All right, moving over to finance. Commissioner Leduc.
I'd like to pass it along to Superintendent DeAngelis.
Thank you. We are going to present the 2020 proposed operating budget to you this evening. So before we review the budget, I wanted to review the timeline for all the activities and actions that are required by the board that relate to the budget. So again, tonight we'll be presenting the operating budget to the board. Previously at our last board meeting, we presented the capital project fund budget. Prior to that, we presented information that is related to the operating budget, information on our proposal for employee compensation, which, as we'll discuss tonight, is really a large driver of this budget. So this timeline is designed to approve the budget before the end of the current year. So at the next scheduled board meeting, we are asking to receive direction from the board regarding our proposed budget recommendations. So if there are any changes to what we've proposed, we'll need to know what those are at the next board meeting, or we'll be asking the board for consensus on particular areas that relate to the budget. On that same date, in order to meet the timeline, we have that the board would approve the budget and appropriation ordinance in tentative form. I've added as amended if necessary, because if the board does direct us to make any, so I will prepare the budget and appropriation ordinance in tentative form based on the proposed budget as has been published and will be presented to you. But if the board directs us to make any changes, we will amend that budget and appropriation ordinance in tentative form, but we'll be asking you to approve it at that meeting so that once the changes are made, I can post it and that we will meet the 30-day public inspection timeline. So if the second board meeting in November, there's not 30 days between that board meeting and the last board meeting in December. And again, our goal is to approve the budget prior to the beginning of the fiscal year, which is January 1st. So also at that November 12th meeting, we would ask the board to adopt the Truth in Taxation Resolution, which is not the adoption of the tax levy, but it is required by law that that resolution is adopted not less than 20 days prior to adopting the actual tax levy. The law also requires a hearing if the tax levy increase is greater than 5% of the prior year, and that is not the case for what we're proposing, so we would not need a hearing. However, we would have that resolution adopted at the November 12th meeting. So there are 20 days between November 12th and December 5th. So the suggested schedule is that the board would then approve that tax levy ordinance. There are a few other administrative ordinance resolutions related to the tax levy that the board would approve at that meeting. And then lastly, at the last board meeting in December, we would have the public hearing on the 2020 budget, and the board would adopt the annual budget and appropriation ordinance in its final form. So then we would have completed the budget process, and the tax levy is required to be filed by the last Tuesday in December, which is December 31st. So if anyone has questions on the timeline? Yes.
Why is, I'm just curious, I mean, that is what it is, but, and I've been through this now for the third time, but why is a public hearing so late? What if 1,000 people show up and say, we don't like this, and you're in trouble because of the time?
Well, we do have by law until March 31st to adopt it, so we would basically have to kind of start the clock again. We'd have to, if the board, because of all of this public input, wanted to make changes, then, you know, we would still have time to do that.
But not the tax levy.
No, not the tax levy.
Tax levy is different, those different timelines, that December timeline.
So, and a hearing is not required for the tax levy. It would only be required related to the truth in taxation if the proposed increase was greater than 5%.
So, and logistically, you know, I'm sure you guys are getting a lot of information, right? And if there is something that you're struggling with or you're not agreeing with, right, that we've proposed, it would be best for everybody, like if in the next couple weeks, by the end of October, you could meet with us or bring it up to us, and then we'll keep a list, right? And, you know, let's say somebody doesn't want, salaries or, fees or, the big major ones that we talk about, or something in capital. And so if you feel strongly about that, you don't want it in there, you want to change, the best way is to try to get it to us, even like just a list, or call, Sandra or I, or meet with us. And then we'll bring it back, or send it back to the whole board. Like, these are the things that aren't agreeable, right, to somebody. And then those are the things we'll bring out and vote on in addition to the capital. We'll vote on, everybody good with the capital? Are you good with the salaries? Are you the bigger things that affect the budget? But then we'll also bring your items, that you may have an issue with. So the whole board can discuss it. Does that make sense? Okay.
Thanks, Gail.
Sure.
We did provide, if you haven't had a chance to see your email today, some responses related to questions and requests for more information from the prior two presentations. So we will do that again for anything that is raised here this evening, so that we can keep the process moving. So included in the budget document is the strategic plan. So I wanted to start off because the strategic plan kind of governs our activities with an overview of what that entails. The strategic plan consists of 5 core areas, which are the focus of the Park District. They are exceptional customer experiences, financial sustainability, operational excellence, employee development and retention, and infrastructure and capital management. So a copy of the detailed plan has been provided in front of you today, and again is included in that budget document. Each core area contains strategies and tactics that are derived from the work plan from each department, and this is how we meet our goals. So there were a few adjustments to strategies in the 2020 strategic plan from compared to the prior year's plan. So another change is that we tied the information that was traditionally presented in the work plan, which is a narrative that was part of the budget document. We've tied that to the strategic plan, and now in the proposed budget document, you will find the 2020 tactics listed under each strategy of the strategic plan. And this corresponds to what we were doing previously with the work plan. So under the customer core area, we've adjusted the time frame from every 5 years to a range from 5 to 10 years, as that is the industry standard, and it provides flexibility. Under the financial core area, benchmarking adjustments were previously limited to pricing, and we've broadened that to add operational changes. So we'll compare our operations to other districts as well. The bullet points under the employee core area and asset management are all new additional strategies. So once again, after the end of the fiscal year, when all the data is available, a report for 2019 will be produced with the measurement results for the 2019 strategic plan. So next I wanted to give you an overview. As I mentioned, the detailed strategic plan is included in the proposed 2020 budget document. I'm sorry, Commissioner Leach.
Just a quick question.
Mhm.
Just for the purpose of this meeting, understand, is this the portion where we're going to discuss this document and or changes you just outlined, or is that sometime else?
The strategic plan document?
Yeah.
We can talk about it now.
So this would be the
Yes.
part you just reviewed,
Yes.
because sometimes I'll get a misunderstanding and then want to come back at 2 hours from now. But so it's right now is where we should talk about it, right?
Well, we can talk about it right now. That's
Well, I
that's
don't
fine.
mean- I don't want to shortchange if there's a manager that's going to speak to, like, for the one that just.
No,
struck
this
out
is
to
the
me.
part of the presentation
that
that's
should be
dedicated
discussed.
to the strategic plan.
So in this part, under infrastructure and capital management, I believe you said some of the strategies were changed.
Um,
The ones listed on the screen.
just, yeah,
Those-
those are
Oh,
the only
just
things
that
that
one.
changed.
Not
So,
all these bullet points.
no, just under the asset management core
That's where
area,
I was looking at a lot of them.
we've added it to analyze the tree inventory.
Thank you.
So that was not there
That's the only
before.
clarification I really needed.
You're welcome.
I thought we were kind of talking about the 11 on the paper.
Okay.
So we're good.
Great. So that proposed budget document is posted on the district's website. Also posted on the district's website are the presentations from the September 19th and October 3rd board meetings, and this presentation will be posted there as well. This is just a little snapshot of where that is located on our webpage. So the purpose of the presentation tonight is to present a high-level overview of the proposed budget with a focus on the most impactful areas for which you'll be providing us direction, including the various operating areas. But I just wanted to kind of highlight this budget document because it provides all the detail of where we get to what we're overviewing today. So if you want to dig into where does this information come from, that's where it's located. And in case you haven't had a chance to review it yet, I want to explain a little bit about how that's built and how we get to these overviews that we're going to look at tonight. The document contains a number of levels of detail. There are detailed reports from our financial software, the budget planning portion of it. We have summary reports by account, we have summaries by function, and then we have fund summaries that all total up to the things that we're going to be talking about. So just as a sample, the budget details input into the budget planning software. In this example, they include positions, hourly rates of pay, hours per day, days per week, numbers of weeks, and number of employees to determine what these budgets for part-time positions are here. That information then rolls up into the summary report by account for this area, which is then incorporated into the expense summary for this cost center. So this particular example is at the fitness center. Ultimately, it's all part of the total summary for the recreation fund. So this just I just wanted to give you a little snapshot of what all those pages are in that budget document so you could understand how we got here. And now we'll kind of do an overview of the district's accounting structure. Since the budget ultimately controls how spending occurs throughout the district, we're going to review the structure of how we account for these funds. Tonight, we're going to be reviewing both the general and the recreation funds. And at the prior board meeting, the last board meeting, we covered the proposed spending for the capital projects fund. So this is the accounting structure for the Park District. The funds highlighted in blue each have a separate tax levy extended for those specific purposes. The funds highlighted in pink are recreation cost centers for which we charge fees. I just want to remind you that park districts are unique among governments in that we have this diversity of revenues among property taxes and fees for services. These are the funding sources available to us. While the capital fund does not have a dedicated tax levy, you can see there's nothing here. We do have a tax levy for bonds and debt service here in the general fund, which provides for principal and interest payments for bond issues. And the proceeds from those bonds are then recorded in the capital fund. So that's where the capital fund revenues come from, in addition to the amounts that we're able to transfer from operations on an annual basis, which we kind of call our pay-as-you-go funding. And I think it's important that we have a balance between those two sources. So next I've got an overview of the numbers of all the funds combined. First, where we are estimating our year end at current, based on all of the review along with the budget activities, we're estimating that we will be able to transfer to capital about $344,000 this year. So that's what the transfer is here. The negative that you see here, this loss in the capital fund, this is driven by the timing of major capital projects, that we are spending more this year than we're putting in, but that's because we put in more in prior years. So this is the summary for the 2020 budget, and that you can see where our ending fund balance total is, that it does show a drawdown, but again, this is driven by the capital fund. And the operating activities in the general and recreation fund, we are looking and hoping to be able to transfer $350,000 into the capital fund. And we covered that in our capital fund projections at the board meeting, the last board meeting. So the budget does assume operating revenue increases to certain fees, a 1.9% tax levy increase, which is commensurate with the Consumer Price Index. It's an inflationary index and an assumption for new property. And these transfers are estimates and subject to change. So this chart highlights how the district's sources of revenue are diversified, and it compares the 2020 budget to the 2019 budget. Approximately 50% of the district's non-capital revenues come from fees, and a little more than 40% from taxes, with grants, donations, and miscellaneous revenues such as interest expense, affiliate, and liquor permit fees making up the remaining other percent. So to further detail how these revenues break down, this chart depicts how the recreation fees and charges are distributed across the activities that we offer. As you can see, the largest portion after property taxes is attributed to recreation programs. Similarly, the breakdown of expenses identifies that the general government accounts for the largest portion of expenses. Now, this area includes administration, both in the general fund and recreation. It also includes park services, which is responsible for maintaining the buildings and grounds for the districts. And the next largest percentage is our capital expenses, followed by the recreation programs, which is in line with the revenue in that area. So now we'd like to focus on the general fund. So we'll be highlighting the park services area of the corporate taxing fund. So there's a number of these funds. Park services is part of the corporate fund. Because it accounts for a large portion of the spending in the general fund. And we'll also touch on the debt service fund because we'll be looking for the board to provide direction regarding the bonding plan. This slide shows how the general fund historical revenues compared to expenses for the past 5 years, our estimated 2019 performance, and the proposed 2020 budget. Revenues are depicted by the blue lines and expenses by the orange bars. Excuse me, blue bars, orange bars. When expenses are higher than revenues, in 2016, here, our expenses were higher. And in 2017, we were drawing down our fund balance in accordance to our policy. And now here in the 2020 budget, in the general fund, we're proposing this balanced budget and so that revenues and expenses are equal here in the general fund. So we've looked at the numbers for all of the 3 combined funds as a whole and the historical revenue and expense trends for the general fund. Now this chart shows the bottom line for the general fund balance, which are the bars, and it compares that to the district's fund balance retention level. So what is the fund balance retention level? The district has adopted a fund balance policy which requires that the operating fund maintain a fund balance which is a minimum of 2 months or 17% of fund balance or a maximum of 4 months or 33% of expenditures. Is that right? So we want to have fund balance to this level in order to give us financial flexibility to meet our ongoing expenses. So here we see how we were drawing this fund balance down. I can't get my practiced and it worked, and now it's not working. It shows how we, so as of 18, this also demonstrates the stability here that we are proposing for this fund. We're at a fund balance retention level of just a little under 3 months, or 25%. And we feel that that is a good, healthy fund balance, and allows us that financial flexibility. And the fund balance remaining stable is also a good thing. Oops. So I'm going to turn it over to Terry Wolf, who will talk about the Park Services area.
Thank you, Sandra. Sorry, we're going to turn this off. So you get to listen to me this evening again talk about the budget, but I won't be nearly as long as I was at our last meeting. Just got a little bit to cover here. So in front of you is the Park Services portion of the general fund. As you can see, we are primarily an expense account. As Sandra mentioned, we cover the majority of expenses, non-capital expenses that are incurred by the Buildings and Grounds Department throughout the district. These expenses include things for all buildings at Prospect, including Wohlers Hall, hockey. Also includes Hinckley, Garage, South Park, and it includes certain expenses at Main Park and the Activity Center. This year overall, the budget proposal for the Park Services area proposes a overall decrease of in this area about 32,000, or 1.5% approximately. I do want to point out that there was an increase of about 8,000 overall, or 6,000 in another area that's kind of offset in the recreation fund for some staffing things that we'll talk through in a little bit. So, but for consistency in this area, this number is down by about 32,000. We do, and it is important for me to mention that we do have, like I said, other expenses in other building areas. So every facility has different maintenance accounts that we work from, and the staff works closely with the facility managers to plan those budgets. So some of the main drivers for the change and the reduction in our budget area for this year is an increase in our miscellaneous revenue. This was an area that we looked at over the past several years, and we've realized that there's been an increase in how we're receiving reimbursements from PDERMA. We're getting rebates for different programs and projects that we're doing, whether it's for propane mowers, et cetera. We're making sure that we are diligent about scrapping metal instead of just putting it into the garbage. And when feasible, obviously, we're using our recycling bins. But when the opportunities present itself, we'll take the time to scrap the metal, and those revenues are deposited in this fund, as well as some of the surplus sale revenues that received from items when we asked for surplus property. So it seemed prudent for us to increase this revenue line because the trend had been going up, but we weren't recognizing it in our budgeting. In addition, we've continued to reduce overtime. Assistant Superintendent Solberg has done a great job in this area over the past several years. It's been a team and concerted effort, and it takes a lot of energy. But just for an example, in 2016, we had over $95,000 in overtime expenses. This year, for 2020, we have again reduced our request in this area, and we're requesting now $57,000 in park services. So it's a large reduction in the overtime over those past several years. Included in the park services budget, as well as included in one of the recreation admin budgets, is a few IMRF positions. When we talk about an IMRF position, we're defining that as a part-time position that works over 1,000 hours, but under 1,500 hours, and they're eligible for the IMRF pension. The purpose behind doing this is to allow the staff those additional approximately 500 hours to work. It does have a cost to the district, which is included in the budget 4 IMRF positions that I'm proposing across these 2 areas, it has an approximate total budgetary impact of about $8,000 for the district. But as you'll hear a little bit more, we feel like that's justifiable in offsetting some of our other expenses. For example, in the IMRF for the grounds position, while it doesn't have a direct revenue impact, it does have an impact on savings and staff time and overtime that we have primarily on the shoulder seasons, which we consider spring and fall, where we're really inundated with a lot of lawn mowing, grass cutting responsibilities. It's a challenge for us because there aren't as many seasonal staff or part-time staff available. When we do have part-time and seasonal staff, they're not as dedicated, they're not well trained. It's some of the equipment that we use takes a lot of training and expertise. We want to make sure people understand our parks, know their way around our parks, and understand all of our policies and procedures when they're out there doing the work. So we feel like this is an area that's very important to have this added position. For the 3 IMRF positions we have proposed for building attendants, and that budget is within the recreation admin accounts. That has about a $6,000 cost for IMRF, just for the addition that the Park District would have to pay into the IMRF over those 3 employees. But we would allow us to reduce the overtime by approximately $7,000 or more. See, what's happened over the past few years as rentals and things have become more popular and frequent, we find ourselves in positions where we have to fill gaps in service with full-time staff. We are constantly hiring new building attendants, retraining, training them for different facilities, and then losing them as they progress on and look for other jobs that are more permanent in nature and not as flexible in schedule. So we have a few staff that have been with us for quite some time, are very dedicated. In fact, some of the ones that community members, including some of the commissioners in this room, have made comments about their exemplary work and performance at jobs when we've had special events. Some of those staff don't have any interest in finding more employment or further employment, but would be willing to work more hours if they were available. We find ourselves capped at staffing them for only 1,000 hours a year. So this is an example where when they get to the point where they're capped and we don't have enough trained staff, or we have some last-minute call-ins or some people call in sick, we're forced to bring in full-time staff, and we're paying a premium to do that. So this would be a clear opportunity for us to have some reduction, but in addition, it would add us 1,500 hours over those 3 staff of highly skilled, dedicated employees that helps us serve our customers all that much better. Several other things throughout the budgets have been reduced in the efforts to make this, and we had some that, some areas that went up a little and some areas that went down a little, but I'm going to talk through a few. One that was specific that I wanted to point out was our tennis court maintenance budget. We reduced by $6,000. The reason behind this is because we've recently renovated Hinckley, as everyone knows. We're also proposing and planning on renovating the Woodland Courts next year, which had a large maintenance item to it in the past. And we're also proposing in capital to renovate the JC tennis courts. So with the reduction of all these courts and putting in the new surfacing, we'd have an anticipation that we would have a lot less crack filling needs. And so staff felt comfortable by reducing this budget. We still will have $8,000 available to do some maintenance and repair items, but we felt comfortable that reducing this out of there was appropriate. Some additional areas are maintenance and repair budgets. Maintenance and repair is just a section or a portion of our budgeting that accounts for things that we do generally with contractual accounts. And there's been some changes here that I thought I would just highlight and identify just so that you have some understanding of where we made some effective changes and savings or found areas that we had to increase. But overall, kind of collaborated to bring us to where we were able to reduce this budget in whole. Fire and safety across the district and in this area continues to be an area that we find additional needs for expenses, whether it's for just repairs or upkeep to the different facilities that we have and the systems that we have. Over the past several years, we've added on facilities such as buildings at Prospect Park, which are all paid for out of this area. And so we've seen an increase in the frequency for maintenance needs, and the cost for those maintenance needs indicated that we should increase this budget area. Other areas, though, however, that we looked at in maintenance and repair budgets, such as contractual, not elsewhere classified, we were able to reduce by $4,500. Machinery and equipment we reduced by $2,000. Our facilities budgets we reduced by $5,800, and that's facilities that would be related to like Main Park, South Park, Hinckley, and anything here at Prospect. So we were just reducing that budget by that amount because we felt like we had enough to work with in that budget, and we could reduce it comfortably. The grounds budget allowed for a $7,000 deduction, and Sandra found a reason to reduce the utility for water by $5,000 for this year's budget. So, so these are all things that have added and allowed us to maintain this budget level for this year in an effort to do our part to help keep the budget under control for the district. As I indicated, we work very closely with the rec department to make sure that we're managing expenses throughout the district and in all of those budgets. However, this is an area that just covers specifically the grounds and some of these other buildings that are community-wide buildings. If there's no other questions, I'm going to turn it back over to Sandra.
I had a real quick question.
Yes.
Forgive me, is it IMRF? Is that how you refer to it?
IMRF, yes.
The $8,000 for the four, is that per person or just
In total, yeah, it's approximate. There's a fee, there's an amount, and it ebbs and flows every year. When we're going through the budgeting process, Director DeGangi provides each staff with a template to assist us in planning for any needs that we may have for staffing. And so she has the updated rate for the year that indicates what the percentage of that person's pay rate is for IMRF contributions. That would be the Park District's contributions. And so I did the calculations for, we have 4 specific employees in these areas that while they're currently working for us as part-time staff, we've identified them as ideal candidates to bring into these IMRF positions. One of the reasons we're able to save is because we're really only realizing the change in making them IMRF and having that added on. We're not increasing their rate of pay. They're still working that, and if it wasn't them working those hours, it would be someone else working the hours at a similar rate of pay. So it's specific to each individual, and it's in the neighborhood of $2,000 for each one of them. Sure. Yes, Mr.
Sorry. I have 2 questions. Do we have this somewhere? This presentation? We have the budget, but we don't have this, right? We're going to post it to the website. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so I forgot already where you are as a department, higher or lower?
For next year.
For next year, yeah.
Go back to that.
Yep. We are lower than we were. Yep.
3,000.
It's about it's like 32,000, but again, when you take into consideration add the 6,000 on the other department, but
It's down.
yeah, it's like 24, 28, something like that. So, yep. Yes.
Just to clarify, in terms of the 4 people, did I get this? You're going to increase their cap from 1,000 hours to 1,500 hours,
Correct.
and then those 500 hours would then not be needed from somebody else that's lesser qualified and or whatever. Is that right?
Correct. Yep. Yes, Mr.
What I have on that, and I think it's smart what you're looking at with the employees, is on the IMRF employees. Refresh me again, how many do we have those in your department today?
We have 2 technically in my department. One is a building attendant that works primarily at South Park. And then we have another one that works over primarily at Oakton, and he's technically in my department, although because of what he does and the nature of his work, he deals directly with Manager Dolan primarily. But
Sellers at Oakton.
oh, is it budget? Yeah, so it's budgeted in Oakton. Okay, but he's in my department, so no, that's fine. And I think just to clarify, some of the staff that are in my department are not budgeted in the park services. They're budgeted in the other facilities. For example, we have a full-time maintenance personnel that's in the fitness center. And while they're in my department, they're not budgeted here. They're budgeted within that facility.
So if I can clarify, which is maybe where you're going, you might have one, and it sounds like the other one's in Oakton.
You
The
know,
two?
and I apologize, I was thinking of full-time employees.
Me too.
So I'm not
Yeah.
sure whether your part-time employees are.
Oh, yeah, I'll let you go.
I just want to kind of understand, as I think the district's moved in the recent years to more contracting out services, and potentially using back to your point, in the shoulder seasons, the seasonal or different types of labor. What I think I'm hearing is this gives you flexibility over the course of a year with people that you already maybe know or maybe will soon know as you hire or,
Mhm.
or retain. The question I'm trying to get is, how much are we really going up from a head count, if you think of the four in that category,
Sure.
across all of these type of fund accounting features? Meaning, just if they come under an org chart and you're somewhere on their top, that's kind of the answer I'm trying to look for.
So
Versus contract labor,
How many new staff or how many IMRF positions?
just back to the original question. I'm just trying to isolate that level of a position that's non-contracted labor.
sure. And
Just the four, right? And
That's really all you have.
adding for next year.
No, I'm talking about total.
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 No, total
Sorry.
with full-time people. And that's what I was gonna say. Terry's got more in his department that are,
Yeah.
he was just referring to, I think, part-time.
Yeah.
The
So-
full-time staff get IMRF.
Yeah, so I'm just saying if there's 40 and you're adding four, that's 10%.
Right.
Not very good.
So if for part-time in my department, like looking at it from an org chart, if you were to look at an org chart under the buildings and grounds department, I believe that we have 2 currently, and we're adding 4 with this request.
And that's not counting full-time.
That's not full, that's just
That's just the
part-time.
So you're increasing your part-time labor. Then if you include both categories, what total are we at to? Because people ask me, do you have as much personnel as you used to? It seems like you've outsourced it more. I don't really understand that number, so I'm also just trying to understand from a general knowledge.
Sure. And so the answer to your question was, and then add the full-time,
Yep.
assuming IMRF,
Approximately.
it's approximately 19 or 20 more
Okay.
full-time.
Okay.
And then there's another 40 plus more part-time non-IMRF that we have in that same area. So,
Yeah.
right. So the question there is, and we've seen a shift over the last several years where we've done a little bit more with part-time staff than we used to, and it's ebbed and flowed over time. We did have a reduction of a full-time employee this last year from 2019 budget to 2020 budget with some reorganization that we did in the buildings and grounds department. So, it ebbs and flows a little bit. We had an ad a few years ago, and then we reduced back again this year when we saw an opportunity. So,
So the only follow-up question I have, and then I'll cede it back, is based on what you're recommending with the 4, the change of the 4, which are current part-time, to the IMF, I'm going to mess up that acronym, that category, you feel you now have, especially in the shoulder months where you're most at risk at this, enough staff under your watch to handle these type of needs as you expect them to be next year. So meaning, if you felt like you were tied and there were situations where you're taking these cost overruns or more overtime, this should help and this is sufficient, or is there still a gap?
I would say that there's probably still a gap, but I think this certainly helps keep us going in the direction of meeting those needs as they evolve and change. It depends. There's things that we used to do, ball field renovations, things like that would be an example of something that we would do internally in the past, where I think now that's more of something that we would look towards contractors to do, and we look at that when we're looking at capital dollars more often. We still do some minor renovations and work, but we don't have overall the time and staff that we used to be able to accomplish all those things. So, and I think it's just been various different shifts. When I first started here, they were using temp laborers to help cut the grass, but the grass was getting cut very poorly at best. So, and that was, you know, advertised to us that that was unacceptable the way things were happening, so we had to make some changes. So I think this helps us with some of the needs and some of the deficiencies in many of those areas, but I wouldn't say that it fills every need that we possibly have, but those ebb and flow a lot. So
And if I could jump in, because several of those positions are for just building attendants, and our facilities are just so heavily used that the needs are increasing that they just can't keep up with, and the staff that are there can't keep up with. And as Terry said, there's several that are just amazing at what they do that we wish we could have them on more, and that fills that need. So as far as the rest of the department, I can't speak to that, but the building attendants, we definitely are seeing an increase in building usage. We're packed.
definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, I will turn it back over to Sandra. We'll turn on her laser pointer.
So one of the funds included in the general fund is the debt fund. It includes principal and interest payments on both limited and referendum bonds. But here I am showing the limited bond capacity that we discussed. So this is the line here. When Bob Lewis from PMA presented the options related to our bonding program at the last meeting. As a reminder, this line here represents the limited bond debt service extension base, which is the amount equal to the portion of extension for a taxing district from the 1994 levy, which beginning in 2009 was able to be increased by the lesser of 5% or the CPI. So that's what governs where this line is at. I've included it here because the proposed budget does contemplate this bond issue here, that we would issue that in 2020, and those proceeds would be available for capital, and that first year of debt service would also be in the 2020 budget. So now we're going to discuss the various areas in the recreation or the special revenue fund, as it's sometimes called. First, I'm going to provide an overview, and then Superintendent of Recreation, April Armour, will provide the details for each recreation area, and her staff is here to help out if there's questions. So similar to the general fund, this chart shows the recreation fund revenue and expense trends historically. Here we're budgeting for revenues to exceed expenses so that we can continue to annually invest in that capital projects fund. This is where the amount comes from that we're able to transfer into capital at the end of the year, and what we've projected in the capital fund going forward. And this chart also demonstrates the stability of our fund balance. You can see how we want to keep that level, and where our fund retention level is right around the 30%, which is right where we want it to be. And now I'm going to turn it over to Manager of Marketing and Public Relations, Margaret Holler, who is going to talk about the marketing activities that are budgeted for in the Recreation Fund.
I jump in here before April because my accounts are budgeted for in the rec admin. So I'm just going to review some of the marketing initiatives for 2020. First, we're going to implement a public relations campaign in July for National Parks and Recreation Month. This year's theme was Game On. They have not released the theme yet for 2020, but we'll do something to tie it into that again. We're also going to create weekly staff and instructor profile videos for social media. This summer we did them for camp counselors, and we thought that was really well received, so we want to just kind of spread the wealth throughout the district and hit other areas too. We started meeting monthly with the Oakton Ice Arena staff, and we're going to continue doing that throughout 2020. We've been meeting with Centennial Fitness Center for over a year now, and it's really helped us all just kind of work together and try some new tactics and try to increase our revenues. I'm also continuing to provide guidance to the Friends of the Parks to raise $55,000 towards the outdoor nature classroom. We're currently at $24,500, and I believe Mary Ann put the rendering in your information that you have today. So the majority of the marketing accounts have remained very stable compared to 2019. There's not much differences, but these are a few that do have changes. First, we have an expense savings of $6,000 annually due to hosting the board information on prparks.org as opposed to IQM2. So that's a screenshot of how it looks on our website now. We incurred those development costs this year, so next year we could see the savings with that third-party site, which was about $6,000 a year. So Mary Ann helps manage that site now, but it's all internally. We also created a sustainability committee account. A lot of our teams in the district have an expense account, and sustainability did not, so we created one this year. It's budgeted at $3,800. What's budgeted in there is interpretive signage at 2 parks explaining the benefits of rain gardens. So over here at Prospect Park, we have this bioswales sign. So it'll be similar to that, but it'll be on rain garden information. And we're looking at Centennial and Northeast, where we have those native planting areas. And then we're also looking to add more composting at our community events, particularly Earth Day, the 2 summer concerts at Hodges Parks that we host, and the Oktoberfest event. This year, we did have collective resources at Oktoberfest, and it was very well received. So, yes,
Can I ask a question here? Because I like the
interpretive signage.
I like that, but I've always wondered: is it mainly a cost function of why we don't have more of that signage?
Yes.
Because I've always wondered through the past at Wayne Park and everywhere else, and I'm looking at it and saying, why wouldn't we mark more trees or mark more what this is or that?
So that sign at that size with that base is $1,400.
You have to be careful what kind of materials you get and everything, because vandalism.
Right. So these are vandal resistant. They're 10-year warranties. So, yeah, it's a cost thing.
That's interesting. No, I was at the Botanic Garden a month or 2 ago, and they are great at that, right? So
They have a lot of money.
should have had more to do with money than.
We should get their leftovers.
Yeah.
Not really.
Maybe we could do that.
All comes back to money.
Give us what you're done with, and we could see if we have a place for it.
No, I had it in mind only in something I think we're going to talk about later was the one strategic thing that I think added to the
The
graphics on infrastructure with the
tree inventory.
and all that. I would love that if it's even a PDF, I hate to be that just rough about it, that we would be able to denote like where some of these varieties are. And that way if someone's into that and wanting to understand it, they can know where to go. Right now, I'm not trained, and my kids wouldn't be trained, but
Probably have that.
City.
I think we have it, or
Got an
we
inventory.
do have.
When we update the inventory, we could probably develop it in a way that could be on the website and have links to allow people to go to any park and determine which trees are which. So
And I'm just interrupting, I'll let Commissioner Groff speak, but I think what you're saying is you have most of the data, but the way it can be interacted with the public is the marketing side that I think could make it really cool to know where some of these native oak groves are, like at Northwest, and different things, and it just pulls in the whole.
Yeah, in
feature. That's just what it's
2015, I know we had a document on there showing where we planted the 100 trees that the Friends of the Parks sponsored, and what variety they were and where they were located. But I think with updating the tree inventory, we'll be able to do a lot more.
yeah, we could do something interactive and something that could even include any donated trees and stuff like that too. So.
Yeah, love it. Thank you.
Well, we're talking about maybe a nature game for children too, just to learn more about the environment. Would be fun, possibly.
This year we held a Bio Blitz, which was a lot of fun, and Julie and her staff helped with it. And I know we talked about maybe trying to incorporate that into some other things like maybe Earth Day or that. But that was a fun thing that you used your phone with, and it was interactive.
Terry, I think Brandon at the city has all the trees in iNaturalist.
Oh.
Their inventory is in iNaturalist, which is what we use.
What we use for Bio Blitz.
Yeah. So, because it's free.
Yeah.
And as a reminder, part of the grant at the Nature Center will help with some of that signage too eventually.
At the Nature Center, there is money there to improve a lot and add a lot of interpretive signs like this there.
Great.
Any other questions for me? Otherwise, I'm going to hand it over to April.
Good stuff.
So this evening, I will be presenting the recreation operations overview. I have the rec management team here, and they certainly contributed many hours in research and a major role with their supervisors to contribute to this overall budget. We have Ethan Williams, Jennifer Myers, Julie Grieve, Brent Dolan, and Amy Murin. So they're here to answer questions that I may not be able to answer. Sometimes we get really specific, and to help me out, of course. So the direction was to increase fees across the board, so keep that in mind, up to 1.9% if the market can bear it, and to increase salaries up to 3%. So the team is challenged with balancing this fee increase along with the salaries and the increase of other expenses throughout their areas. Throughout this process, part of the team's research, and this goes down to the supervisors of each program, is to compare our programs and fees to our competition and other park districts, private entities, and then go from there to make a recommendation as far as whether the market can bear making an increase or not. So if there's any variances with that, I'll point that out throughout the process here, or throughout the presentation. So they spend a lot of time doing that, trying to make sure our fees are fair, and if we are recommending a larger increase, that we can bear it. The Park District runs through the ebbs and flows of participation increases and decreases throughout all of the centers, and there's all the competition and other factors in the programs that we look at also. So there's definitely a challenge with all of the facilities and competition that have popped up recently in the area. With that being said, we're definitely proud to have been a part of the entire team to serve 35,686 registered participants in 2018. And 368,865 daily users. That's pretty awesome. And so that increased just from 1 year, from 2017 to 2018 by over 10,000 people. And this does not include any of the free events and offerings, and of course the people that use our parks and walk through and use our beautiful grounds on a daily basis. So it's really just the people who scan and register. So we have a really amazing and dedicated team of people out there serving the public. It's a lot of people each year that come run through our facilities and parks. So as I run through the slides in the recreation department, there will most often be some numbers on the top that talk about the 2019 budget, our year-end estimates, and then our 2020 budget. So you kind of get a snapshot of how things look in each center. And then there will be a chart on the bottom that will kind of show you the visual of that. So our first area, this is really the only area that doesn't reflect the facility operations expenses, including the full-time salaries. And it's primarily our recreation program area, which Julie Grieve oversees. It includes athletics, dance, camps, early childhood, preschool, teens, youth programs, the parties, the music classes, Beyond the Bell, and the special events, many of which are subsidized, such as the fireworks. As you can see, this picture tells a great story of the way the programs continue to expand and grow with the needs of the community. I did want to point out that here in 2014. This is where we started the Beyond the Bell program in all of the schools. We did have the pilot program just at one school here, and then jumped to all 5 schools here. In 2017 is where you see a slight dip, is when we added the positions we've been talking about, the IMRF positions in all the schools. We are juggling as well, like hiring separate staff for before care and after care, and juggling that for quite some time. And the kids needed the consistency, and the staff did too, with the same supervisor for the before and after school. And this is also when we started to incur the rental fee for the school district for that program. You will see the year-end estimate to be slightly lower than what we budgeted. And you may or may not remember that our youth basketball program, we had an accrual issue when we rolled that over and rolled over Rec Track. So that's part of this. Some of the revenue actually went into 2018. And we did also add the payment for our online software for camps, preschool, and Beyond the Bell. And additionally, some programs that we budgeted for ran with less participants than we anticipated. Our 2020 budget shows an increase, and that's primarily due to the fee increases we're proposing. And a few of the programs we're hoping to see additional growth. Well, we know we're going to see growth in Beyond the Bell. We're already over 1,000 participants. And some camps, and we're hoping gymnastics will see some growth with the Olympics season. So within the recreation program area, we did want to highlight some new programs. We're trying out a new contractor, Skyline Athletics, to offer some things that we are not currently offering. A full steam ahead early childhood class, new addition of our Subway Surfing Camp, and 2 additional family concert at Prospect Park. Those are all included in the budget. We do plan to complete our standards and pass our on-site visit to maintain our camp accreditation. And if you may recall, we did offer 11 weeks of camp this year based on a change in the school schedule. So where we currently have 10 weeks of camp budgeted, we would of course adjust if the school district decided to change something. We are proposing to increase the following fees over the recommended 1.9%. The dance program, we're proposing to increase 2.3 to 4% depending on the length of the class. We did increase Beyond the Bell by 3%, and part of that is to cover the ePact software. And we added an increase to camps as well for the ePact. The room rental hourly fees, we did increase 5% based on our comparisons to surrounding facilities and our competition. We're extremely low, and they proved to be very popular, as already mentioned, with the building attendant needs. In our TOT exploration program, we're increasing actually up to 14% because we do need to increase our ratios and add an additional teacher. And included in this budget, we also have the full year of the competitive wage increase for the preschool, early childhood, and parties and event staff. That was approved by the board last year and implemented this fall.
Quick question?
Yes.
What's the gist of Skyline Athletics?
We're going to do indoor soccer with them.
Oh, like it. So they're, I take it, a vendor? Are they a vendor then?
Yeah,
Okay.
they're a contractor. And then I think we're hoping to also do some contracted classes with them here at Prospect Park.
Nice.
We do currently have 2 sports contractors, and they can really only accommodate so much. And the public definitely always asks for more with that age group.
Definitely.
Oh, I had a quick question.
Sure.
Why dance is an area to increase more than the 1.9%?
I believe part of it was based on our comparative fees.
When we went, I don't have the comparative fees in front of me, but when we went, we looked at, I think like 10 or more different districts. We were below all of the local competitors. And even the private studios in the area are much higher than where we were at.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah, and it's not too much higher. Those are from 2.3 to 4%. And our dance instructors do have some higher wages too, so it's hard to keep up with. That's primarily the biggest expense is the staff, and it's hard to keep
I
that
know.
gap with the.
I think like from what I've seen from my son being in the ballet program, like I've been very impressed, and I think it's reasonably priced. I guess my one question would be though, then would there be some ability for parents to say like pay in installments because the dance I think is very reasonably priced. Like having to pay for the whole year up front can be a little daunting.
You can do payment plans, especially our Ascension dance team, which is a higher cost. We do set up payment plans for that.
Okay, I was curious.
Weren't our numbers down for the dance team in our board report?
For the Ascension dance team?
I thought the dance overall.
Overall.
Is not the dance team. I think
Not
is
the
up.
dance team.
But we want to increase costs and our numbers are down for dance. Just calling that out.
There are some that, even though numbers are slightly down, you still have the same cost for the teachers, and it's, in order for us to keep that quality program, we have to keep, paying our teachers what
So
they
it's
need to be
a
paid.
cost center, you're evening out the price for the, and passing it on.
Mhm. We've definitely made some strides, though, and with our participation, it's still down, but as to where it was a couple years ago, it's building back up. Outdoor pools. So outdoor pool facilities are obviously very weather dependent, and the weather did not cooperate, if you recall, at the start of the season, May and part of June, and we had a lot of rain this summer as well. So you will see that our year-end estimate is down from where it has been, but we think we're in a really good spot given the weather situation that we had. I just wanted to point out a couple years here, and here's where we closed Oakton in 2011. In 2014 is where we opened Centennial. 2016, we had a tremendous weather year with minimal rain and very warm the majority of the summer, and Prospect opened this year. And this year we also did about $50,000 worth of projects at the end of the summer that were much needed and would have rolled into the 2017 budget. So we decided to take advantage of that surplus that we had, which would have been way up here. In 2018 is when we started the wage scale adjustments and bumped up the starting salaries to $10 in 2018.
I think I had a discussion with you or Gail one time about after you open a pool, usually you put a new feature in every few years or so. Are we there yet? Do we need
Centennial.
Yeah. I mean, do we need to put something new and splashy in?
Splashy.
Lazy River.
No pun,
no, lazy
pun intended.
The lazy puddle. No, more chairs.
Water cannons.
Yeah.
She won't let me do log rolls either.
Not me personally.
Oh.
Paderma.
Oh, it's always Paderma.
You know, we have talked about that, but that's of course, financial, and we just feel like we have so many operational things and other capital things that have been priorities.
But it is a thing, right? That you like freshen up your pools after
times.
Yeah, at times.
maybe 2021.
Have a good weather year and we'll talk.
So-
Well,
Yeah,
Said it a lot.
there's so many needs in some of the aging facilities that it's hard to put in a new feature when there's still some things we need to upgrade at some of the facilities.
South Park.
Yeah. We did. The turtle was put in last year, right? South Park turtle? This year? And
April.
I have just so I'm clear, because I'm a new guy here.
Sure.
The expenses that go into this, so that we're net positive here, but that's everything having to do with running the pool. There's not some expense someplace else that comes in. What I'm trying to get at is, even with the bad weather year, we're ahead of the game. But if there's some expense, and I don't know what that would be, but I know in some cases some expenses are spread.
Places.
There's different places where those expenses sit, and I'm just trying to get a clearer picture of
Sure.
the pools themselves.
The only things I believe that would not be included are some of Terry's staff that contribute to the maintenance of the pools, as well as anything that would be in capital.
Yeah, just to speak to that, some of the staff full-time staff that primarily work with the pools have a portion of their wages allocated off to there, so a percentage, because they don't work their full season. But some of the full-time staff have a percentage of their pay allocated. So essentially, they're still being budgeted in there, and then any
Budgeted in there for that expenditure there, and then they're budgeted into wherever else they're working during the rest of the time.
it's a percentage over the course of the year. But I think it's
We determined an expense allocation for full-time employees, and that includes Ethan. His salary is split between the pool and the fitness center because they're aquatic expensive fitness center. So we determined an allocation. So this is like where we get into the, is the perfect the enemy of the good? Are we best allocating?
Right.
Could we allocate better? Maybe if Ethan spends more time. You know what I mean? It's hard to identify, but we do the best we can, and there are those expenses that are allocated in that budget.
Capital.
Sorry to jump in, Terry.
yeah, capital is
Capital.
not.
Capital is not in.
That's the only thing I was gonna say. I think to redirect, how's the pool at Centennial? 5 years? Yep.
14.
Going on 6.
Going on 6, and that was, what was the cost around that? Around $5 million?
7.5.
7.5.
That's what the parking lot.
With the parking lot.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. So let's just say, easy numbers. I think what you're trying to go at, Commissioner Coyne, is typically you'd see in a gap-based financials, you'd have some type of amortization or some type of appropriation of the cost of the capital. The clear thing in this is there's none of that in here.
No.
It's a total separate thing. Okay. That, if it's fully loaded, and we run into it, you'll see at the community center, more appropriate that way.
Fair enough. Thank you.
I have one question while we're on outdoor pools. Do we have feedback from the food vendor yet as far as how that turned out? I know the weather was bad, so was that a good experience or bad experience for them?
I think it was a pretty good experience. We're still wrapping up the financials, but
Okay. I heard a lot of positive feedback as far as the food and the menu items as compared in the past.
yeah, compared to the past, we definitely had much less complaints as far as that goes.
I think I maybe had 1 or 2 complaints throughout the entire summer, which honestly is phenomenal compared to the year before. I've only had 2 summers with 2 different food vendors, but I feel like this past year was just better from a customer service
So some of the details for about the aquatic facilities throughout the budget. Here's just some highlights and some proposed changes. Ethan is going to bring a cardboard boat regatta as a new special event for 2020. So something new and exciting to bring to the aquatic center. We are proposing a swim lesson fee increase of 4.75%, which is still within our comparable rates of the surrounding park districts. And it's well below the private facilities fee. This is one that, again, we've seen some decrease in participation, but we don't feel this fee increase is significant enough to affect the decision of whether or not to register with us. And will assist in bridging the financial gap with the reduction in participation. We are proposing to increase the pool pass fees by 3%. And we would like to adjust the minimum age requirement for unsupervised entry into aquatic facilities from 7 to 9 years. The reason we're proposing this age change, there's become an increasing amount of young children coming into the facility unsupervised and causing the lifeguards issues. And then it requires them to focus on the unsupervised children over the safety of the patrons. We did survey.
I know you and I had a long discussion on this. But one of the things I forgot to ask: how are you going? Excuse me. How are you going to enforce that?
When they check in, so it pops up that they're under the age.
And if they're a daily fee, then
Yeah.
you're kind of stuck.
Yep. Or we can ask them.
Okay.
We did survey other park districts. Out of the 18 park districts surveyed, 12 districts had their minimum age set at 10 years old or older. So we're not off base with this either.
Set it at 18.
That would be amazing. That would be an issue with the lifeguards. So.
I do have a question regarding the fees and the increases. You increased the fees last year or the year before?
Last year we did a 2.1% increase, and then in 2018 only the non-residents.
Okay, and did you, in terms of use, it's hard to tell, I guess. Well, you can tell how many passes you sold, so I guess you'd know that. Is that diminished after the increases, or do you have more? I know you told us those numbers before, but
We don't believe that the passes were less this year because of the fee. We believe it was because of the weather. We're tracking even the sales at the beginning of the season. It's so weather dependent. And in 2018, it was like, when they were predicting opening weekend that it was going to be in the 90s, it was that last week was just, you were slammed. And we didn't get that this year. And then as it diminished throughout
well,
June.
At a certain point, it becomes, why would you buy the pass?
Right.
There's only so many weeks.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so you're taking a little bit of a risk because while you believe that, you have no way of actually quantifying it. You're kind of taking, just by comparing to the prior year, you're kind of thinking, well, that's the way it goes. So you're taking a little bit of risk by doing that, but your rates are comparable to other districts.
They're comparable and most are lower. Most are higher. I'm sorry. We're lower than most.
We're lower than that's what I think.
And then we did just get our survey results back, and it talked about the fee, right? We just got the summary back, but. But we'll double check that to see if there was a.
Yeah, just obviously we want to monitor that, to make sure that our fees are in line and that we're not losing residents, that we're not diminishing residents' participation because we're pricing ourselves out of the market.
Our fees are definitely in line. They're higher for non-residents, but I think they're intended to be higher, and that was part of the strategy with the board's decision to only raise the non-residents. The pools definitely still get used. They're still pretty crowded. Let's see. The next one was the non-resident rate for the outdoor pool rentals. We currently don't have non-resident rates, so we are proposing to add that fee, 25%, for all rentals except for the evening rental. When you rent out the whole facility from 8 to 10 p.m. at the aquatic center, we just felt it was too pricey to do that, so we just added the 10% to that specific rental.
April?
Yes.
In this section, are you going to talk about the non-resident fees going back to 2018, or is this the appropriate time to ask?
Go ahead.
Okay, so back to 2018, for some of the people that weren't on the board then, one of the pushes we had was there was some public outcry on social media. There was also some belief by certain board members that it's a pretty good bargain they're getting because they're not subsidizing the tax side of the referendum. It was a non-referendum in this case, but the cost of the capital to put in the new pool. And then because of capacity issues going back to the locker room, we are limited to how much room we can even put in there, and we continually still 6 years later, I guess now 5, 6, are having challenges still with chairs and just on certain hot days, not all days, just certain hot days. So the question I'm phrasing back to again, I just quickly looked at the resident. If I looked at the resident youth rate, it's $6. If I look at the resident non-youth rate, it's $9. And you think that's, or maybe of research, and that's still higher?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How high could we go, do you think, without becoming absurd on this one?
I think we'd have to go back and take a look at that.
That's a daily fee he's talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just talking about the daily,
Oh,
but
it's
it
a
would
daily.
apply as a percent potentially to the pass and or daily.
Mhm.
What I'm saying is, what is the cost that if I went to Glenview
Mhm.
and went to the nice aquatic facility off Greenwood,
Mhm.
and what does that cost mean? It might be lower, but they don't have the same issues as we do on capacity, I don't believe, if I remember going there with the kids. So what I'm trying to figure out is, at what point, if we went up, because percentages sometimes lie, is all I'm saying.
Sure.
So if we went up 30%, that sounds crazy or absurd, to use my term, but that might be $3.
Mhm.
You see what I'm saying? So is $3 a lot? And does that $3 not only add revenue to you and the park district, and also discourage maybe an overcrowding issue from non-residents to start with? That's the only balance I'm trying to get to.
Mm-hmm.
But
So-
you don't get both. If you get the revenue, you don't get the less participation.
Correct.
Yeah, one
But
or
they
the
would
other.
work towards each other, is all I'm saying. They would in essence, if I remember economics, would be working maybe to a goal. If that's indeed a goal, it might just be a thought or an idea bubble.
We
But
can
it's just a
certainly take a
concept.
look at it. I think we are pretty high as far
Yep.
as the non-residents, and that's definitely something that we have heard on our surveys, and they are non-residents, and it's that would be a board direction. We can certainly come back and give you some examples. We have all of that research that we've done, and we did raise that rate in 2018. But the non-residents who get the pool pass surveys have said we can't bring, our guests because it's too expensive, and
I get it.
Yeah.
It's just, and I get it. You and staff have to talk about with Ethan and others. It's a concept that I think is pretty easy for most people to understand because the cost of capital applied to the pool, especially Centennial, is a way to allow the residents to enjoy it more on those hot summery days than the other family.
you can take a look at it.
And what you guys do or not do, I'm just curious on the question of how high could it go?
So the plan for 2020 is also to relocate our camp swim lessons from Hinckley Pool to the Centennial Aquatic Center. In the past, we've had them at both. And, this year, again, because of the weather, people hesitated to sign up and were waiting till the last minute and then just never signed up due to the weather. And so it's more of a, combine and conquer and have everything at one location, also to help with the transportation, buses driving the camp kids around too. And then this also allows for extra time at Hinckley with the removal of the swim lessons. So this is what we propose putting in that empty time slot. And adult swim only on Monday, Wednesday, Friday mornings. That's something that we have heard also on surveys and from patrons that there's not enough time for the adults. So we've thought that this would be a good time to actually be able to provide something without taking something away. Our aqua fitnesses classes are definitely very popular, so that would be Tuesday mornings. Beginning diving will remain there on Tuesdays and Thursdays, along with private swim lessons. And then our lifeguard training, we are proposing keeping Thursday mornings open for that. Currently, the lifeguards only have the opportunity to train after everything is closed. So they're often doing their trainings at 8, 9, 10 o'clock after some of them have, had put in a full shift. So we're proposing keeping one morning open for that so they can have their time slot. One more aquatic slide. We do also have in the fitness center budget to replace the lane lines at the lap pool. And the Scout Swim program was just started. It was offered beginning this fall. And staff is reaching out to local Scout groups to promote this offering. Any Scout group can receive a time, reserve a time to work with the staff on badge completion for swimming. So pass along to any groups you might know. We're trying to find new ways and opportunities to bring in some additional revenue. We are also, as part of the budget process, staff researches all aspects of their budget areas and looked into the differences between Ellis and Stargard services. Ethan has worked with Stargard in the past and found they have very similar quality programs. What is different is there's a higher quality as far as their auditing process goes, as far as Ethan and Olivia are concerned. How the auditors the auditors currently in Stargard have past experience in facility management versus Ellis, and they're just being trained on how to audit facilities without actually knowing how to run a facility. So that's the big difference that they've seen. And this factor, in addition to the minimum of a $5,500 savings we can see in switching to this program, is why we are proposing to change. And this change will be seamless to the public. They won't see any difference in our lifeguards and the services that they're providing. Moving on to Oakton. As we've discussed, class participation has been declining, but staff has again done a great job of consolidating classes and minimizing expenses when possible. The lower revenues you see are mainly due to declining program trend in hockey and figure skating, but staff continues to keep the ice filled with rentals when the classes are decreased. And so we still estimate to end the year pretty close to what we did in 2018, assuming there's no unexpected expenses before the year end. That is, always the risk that we have with our older aging facilities that we have. This year in the 2019 budget, we were way too optimistic and that our participation would bounce back. So in 2020, we've definitely been more realistic. Some highlights from Oakton. They're going to continue the House League team in coordination with Express Hockey. Initiatives to assist in offsetting the decrease in participation. The Try Skating for Free events. We're going to do 3 of them with the Chicago Blackhawks. As Margaret mentioned, we have some marketing initiatives which include cross promotion with our current programs. We'll have a spring program for early level hockey players. We've also restructured some of the way things are done in the facility. There's so many different little pockets with the way the facility was designed, so we're trying to streamline the process and having people just go through the main office. So we were able to reduce some cashier hours and eliminate some public skate times, where we may have had 2 staff on duty. Part of the budget last year proposed a new rink music system, which also assisted with reducing staff hours. And we are proposing a 2.1 increase for Learn to Skate classes and a $5 flat fee increase Learn to Play Hockey. We are definitely still within the market for the classes when we had our comparisons. And then the affiliate and non-affiliate ice rental rates, we're proposing to increase by 3%. And we're at the low end of the market for ice rentals.
April, do we know what percent of our revenue there is made by rental and in-house programming? What?
What percent of our rentals and classes? The revenue
Between programs. Revenues versus the.
Rentals.
for classes versus rentals?
I don't know the percentage exactly. I can figure it out for you. Get that
Okay.
number to you.
Yeah. We'll provide that as a follow-up.
Is the, and again, you may have answered this at a previous meeting, but do you sense that the decline in the participation is related to the decline in the conditions at the facility, or because of a general decline in people sending their kids to skate?
Did you hear that question?
So in general, hockey is down in Chicago across the board. Sorry, hanging out in the back corner here.
That's all right.
So a lot of the other rinks in the area are seeing the same thing. They're seeing that slight decline, mainly based off the success or lack of the Hawks. If you see where our numbers exploded, it was when the Hawks were winning cups. 13, 15. Those were our largest numbers. So across the board in Chicago, they're just seeing a slight decline. Figure skating has been a steady decline, just mainly based on we don't have anybody that's drawing interest to the sport right now. So what we're trying to do is we're also very limited in being able to create additional programming, specifically House League. We lose a lot of kids that come into our program, do our Learn to Play program, and we lose those kids to Niles, Franklin Park, Glenview, because they have big House League programs. And we don't have that availability of ice time to be able to do that. The one House League team that we have is our Mites, and that's our little guys, our U8s. But after that, they have nowhere to go. So if we were to expand Oakton and be able to add the studio rink, we could reallocate ice for programming, which would allow us to then have a House League team at every level, which would allow us to retain kids within the program. That's what's happening. We get kids in the program, we do a great job of developing them, but then they move on because they want to play games. So that's kind of where we're just handcuffed by having one sheet. If the travel program wants to expand, Parker speed skating wants to expand, but there's just so much ice. It's trying to divide up this one piece of pie. It's pretty difficult. So although you see the participation numbers dropping, I think what you would see if that project did go through was we would be able to retain a lot more kids that we're losing, because we're doing our job developing them, but then they're moving on because we have no end game for them unless they're playing travel. That makes sense?
Yes.
I think it's a little bit of a combination. You have the people who are very dedicated to our facility, but if there's somebody who's not from Park Ridge or the immediate area, they're going to compare our rink to another one, and they can
Well,
go.
that's part of it. Part of it is just a trend in the area.
It's a combination.
It doesn't sound like there's a trend. There's no trend in like speed skating picking up or any other kind of skating activity. I don't know what others. I'm not a skater. Weak ankles. But are they
Ice sports.
Are there other sports that are going on the ice that are trending upward instead of downward?
No, I mean, your basic is figure skating, speed skating, ice hockey. There's curling out there, but that's such a niche sport.
something that we could exploit before if we decide to go.
I mean, with a studio rink, there's a lot of, you could do broom ball, things like that, that are pretty popular. So there's some ancillary revenue we can make off that type of stuff.
So it sounds incumbent upon us to make sure that the Blackhawks have good
Yeah,
seasons.
right.
moving
That would be
forward.
nice. That would be nice.
Exactly.
Thank you, Brent. Moving on from Oakton. Next, we have the fitness center. So as you know, staff has been challenged with the multiple fitness centers and private studios popping up everywhere, especially since 2017 is when our neighbor down the street from the fitness center opened. And as a reminder, the indoor swim lessons is also in this fitness center of the budget, and we've talked about the amount of private competition that we have in that area as well. As you can see, the fitness center is still a profit center, just obviously not as much as we have been used to in the past. But it still remains as the highest center area of revenue in this fund, and we're constantly changing and adjusting to assist in offsetting the reduction in participation without affecting service, which can definitely sometimes be a challenge. But as you can see, this year, we're looking up compared to last year. And again, I think we're a little aggressive in our budgeting and didn't get to kick off our marketing initiatives as quickly as we had hoped. But we are expecting to continue to see growth in this area. As Margaret also mentioned, we have a strong marketing plan in place, and staff has been out there hardcore promoting. The non-resident fee was removed and implemented just in August, but as a reminder, we were closed for 2 weeks in August, so we've definitely had the opportunity to see just in the past 6 weeks or so that we're definitely seeing some movement. And our goal was before the end of the year to have 65 new non-resident members by the end of the year. And we've already just almost reached halfway of our goal, and that since August. The group fitness classes have seen, since we implemented this change, a 250 to 300% growth. So we've seen definitely some action there as well. So we definitely feel that the right decision was made, and the word is spreading, and we hope to continue to see this area grow. The facility certainly continues to serve the community despite the drop in membership. It's very busy, and the team pulled some numbers in between drop-ins, classes, and membership. So excluding, again, where we might have a special event and don't have them scan in, about 223,000 people came through the facility just last year, which is pretty amazing. There's certainly slow times, and there always were, but it's still a very busy and active community center, fitness center for all ages.
April?
Yes.
Can you go back to the slide? So on this one, just tell me what's about with your math, either on the revenue and or income line, because both of them just seem to be, I get the non-resident and I get the better marketing, but you're still going from what it looks like, and I don't know what's, so what was, do you happen to know what 17's revenue line was versus income? Probably not. It doesn't matter, but if you just see if the correlation of 20,
It would be on the cover budget sheet.
2 million, almost 2.1 budgeted down to 1.8, and we're back up to 2 million again.
Fee increases.
So is that a big part of that? So if you think of 8 million, I take the fee increases of what, 3%? What was the number again?
We haven't gotten to that yet.
Okay.
So I can go.
I
over
won't
that.
steal your thunder. I won't steal your thunder. But if you,
Swim lessons we have gone over, so that
Yeah.
the fee increases for the indoor swim lessons is part of this.
it just looks like the revenue is still on a little bit of a decline. I'm not saying you haven't stabilized, and I hope you have, and increases. but I think it's a little aggressive at 126 on a net income basis when you're coming off that waterfall with pressures at the top line and at the bottom line, yet your expenses are pretty much flat or slightly up. Just it's a tough model, and I'm not saying you guys aren't doing everything possible. Just when I look at it, I kind of in my head think we might be off for another miss of $50,000 to $100,000 here. That's all. I'm not trying to say you do anything. I'm just
Oh, sure. We had a lot of conversations about this and went through countless drafts. But we did, with some of the things that we've just seen growing towards the end of the summer, some of the new things that have taken off in the group fitness program, we did add those to the budget that weren't actually in the budget this year. And between that and the fee increases, I mean, we were relatively conservative with our programming for aquatics and our fitness classes and our memberships. And part of what I'll talk about is that we're restructuring a few things at our front desk and hiring somebody to kind of be, the face of the front desk and with the personal trainers to do all the tours. And, so that's part of this budget that we hope to continue to increase membership and just have that, have that position help out. And just with some of the numbers we're seeing now, and, the word is getting out. Even today we were talking about October and how many more new people we've seen come in. So,
I have the total fitness center revenue in 2017 was 1.9 million.
thank you.
The only thing that you just said that it isn't borne out by the numbers in your report. It still looks like the membership numbers are just kind of trickling down. They're not spiking up. They clearly haven't trended up in the other direction yet.
oh no, we have certainly not trended up. And part of it is the fee increases. We did some fee increases this year, and we wouldn't have seen the revenue numbers that we're anticipating if we didn't do that.
I guess I'm just.
So again, our focus is on retention and attracting new members. We have staff out and about at district and community events. We continue to work with our staff on customer service excellence to make sure that the people who are coming in are having the best experience. We're going out to local businesses, getting the new businesses in town, and in the areas surrounding Park Ridge also, now that we have the same fee. And we have presence at events in surrounding communities as well. And the addition of the part-time personal trainer, I kind of spoke to that already, that they'll be there and kind of the face of the personal trainers, working with the personal trainers and making sure they get the one-on-one, start to finish experience of the tour of the facility, calling and following up. I mean, we do that now, like a 30, 60, 90, but, we have multiple staff doing that. So this person will really focus on that. It's just a part-time position. But we hope that, with a little restructuring at the front desk, will also bring more personal training clients as well as members. I mentioned some of the new programs. Some of these are already in effect this fall and have proven to be popular. So we did put those into the budget for next year. We did, as you know, put in our capital plan the spin bikes, and it will have the interactive software that will kind of be the first in the area to have that. So hopefully we'll attract some new clientele as well. And we are proposing fee increases. The annual membership fees by $1 per month, and the short-term memberships, depending on the membership, up to 15%. These haven't been increased since 2012. These are the 1 month and 3 month memberships. We are also proposing a $25 cancellation fee to all new members who join after January 1st and cancel within their first year of membership. This is pretty common within the fitness industry, and this is one of the lower cancellation rates as well. Just to encourage people to stick with us and stick with their fitness routine. We're also proposing to increase the group fitness class passes. We have just rolled out a 6-month membership that just rolled out, so we included just a small amount of that in the budget as well. And we're also restructuring our childcare fees to try and help promote and improve the participation in this program rather than having it's just a change in how we're doing it, changing from a punch pass to just one fee, come as many times as you want. And this year, one of our goals is to evaluate and closely monitor the usage and track who's using the racquetball courts when, and see if we would possibly in the future propose a different usage of one of the courts, one of the 2 courts.
There's only one.
Hmm?
There's only one.
Oh, there's 2.
As far as the childcare room goes, has there been any talk about expanding the hours then within different plan? Because like I know personally, like there's been fitness classes that I'll never go to because I don't have childcare, and I had heard from other members of the public that there were things like open swim that just didn't align correctly.
Yeah, it's really tough because if you look at that on its own, it's something that we lose money on, and it's a service for the members. And so for us to expand, it would, financially be a really tough situation to add more hours when we currently have 2 staff in there.
I was wondering though if that could be offset a little bit by the fact that you would have guaranteed revenue versus speculative.
Right.
If you change to a structure that included just like just like the platinum pass, right, where you just pay, you get unlimited.
Yes,
and
that's
it's right.
that's what
like
we're
actual,
proposing.
Like guaranteed revenue versus speculative. Would that
Right.
leave room to expand the hours?
That's something we can look at as we go along. We have shifted our hours based on season, and we try and coordinate them with when we have, our very busy classes. And that's something that they're constantly looking at. I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that.
People are pressured by the time, like, oh, I only want to use a half hour, or I only want to use an hour. You can stay up to 2 hours doing your visit every day instead of, oh, I have to get everything done in 30 minutes, or I only have, so it allows you to take a shower, maybe when you get to work, and it kind of allows you to extend your visit during that morning.
But not if it's during the class you want to take.
Right. If you have a class that starts when the tot room is open, but ends half an hour after it closes, you'll never be able to take that class if you have a little person.
Yeah, we can look at the class schedule again.
And
Some of them we extend to 11:30 because of that.
Mm-hmm.
So they're open till 11:30, so classes start at 10:30. But they end at 11:30. So there are new classes.
Yeah, to have us staff it.
But if you're considering itself as a cost center or whatever, that it has to justify itself, you're also getting revenue from people coming and taking classes.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, you can't. Are you including that? Are you including that you're making money because that person can leave their child somewhere?
Yes, but often there's one child in there the whole time, and then that's when it's,
But
I
that's
get
been,
that, but and I mean, and there's been days
Sure.
when my daughter has been the one child in there, but also, like when I look at one of the things that caused people to go to FFC, it's that they had more childcare options, and that really is kind of a difference maker for a lot of people as to where they go.
Well, when we're looking looking at the financials, that was just something that we had a hard time really budging on because it's, you know, the balance of the people that we've heard that have left because of that is very minimal. I mean, we're always looking at it, but
What are other districts doing?
I looked at Elk Grove and the system that we're proposing, it mirrors their district.
It's not the system, it's the times.
The hours. The hours are exactly the same. The fees are exactly the same. We looked at Des Plaines, we looked at Gurnee, we looked at all kinds of park districts, but it's very set up similarly to Elk Grove. The hours are identical to our hours. So they offer the same amount of hours, but really big facility, very busy facility. But they have the same amount of hours, exactly the same.
yeah, having it open, you
Well,
know, all day,
how
every
much
day
does it
is-
cost us an hour to keep open? I mean, how much are we talking?
That's a direct staffing cost, so you might be paying $24 an hour for 2 staff, and you have 1 child coming in for a half hour or an hour, that might be $2. And they have
But we're not paying by hour anymore.
well,
for the
not yet.
staff we are.
No,
So we're-
but next year you're not paying by hour. I hear the same thing that John hears.
We can come back and look at how much it would cost. I mean, I know you guys have looked at this, but to share
Mhm,
those
sure.
financials with the board, to just look at it and,
Mhm.
you know, how much it would cost to add more hours to make it.
Yeah. Even seasonally in the summer when we see, you know, just our scans and everything go down because people are exercising
Outside.
outside. We took a very close look at the hours and how many people in the past years have participated during those time frames and reduced the hours just to, you know, when we were really struggling with where to reduce things. That was one of the areas that we just did for the season to see if, did anyone comment, did anyone ask? And no one did. That's one that's just tough for us because it's the financial part of it. I know it's a service thing and we still have it as a service that we provide and try and adjust according to when people are asking for it.
Is it possible when they register to indicate if they need childcare or not, and then plan it a little better based on the class and the need? Is that a possibility to look at possibly?
We can also include it on our next survey that goes to the membership. Like if we would adjust the hours, what would be ideal? Or what hours would you need?
Because you could even stagger times of the employees instead of having two at the same time. Maybe one comes in and there might be a little overlap in case someone comes earlier and stays later, that kind of thing.
Well, we need to have 2 people in there.
But we do that now, we stagger. The
Got it.
first person gets in at 8 and the second person at 9. When there's more class, when the classes start, so there is that 1 hour.
And we've also started to research having, which again, we wanted to see how this, you know, just having the unlimited usage would take off, possibly putting a camera in there, but that we'd have to redo some of the wiring and have it, you know, feed into the offices. So if there's only one person in there, you'd need a kind of a backup to go in there if there's a bunch of kids and, you know, to have the parents be able to watch on their phones too if they want to. But that would be a, you know, a financial investment. So we've definitely been looking at it and talking about it. Other fitness center?
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe you just didn't include it on the slide. When you and I met, we talked about you were going to have a fee for people that use credit card to pay rather than direct debit to their account. Did you drop that, or are you still going to do that?
No, we still plan on doing that. It's in the strategic plan. The driving range, as you can see, has remained pretty consistent and stable financially. these years we took a little bit of a dip when we lost private and popular private instructor that we'd had for years. So he left in 2014. So we saw a dip there. We do purchase the mats every other year. This year we saw a little bit of a dip in the revenue here. We did have some storm damage, and inclement weather in the spring had an impact on revenue, but staff was definitely able to manage this expense and assist with offsetting this. So we expect to end the year pretty close to budget. Our junior golf camp has proven to be popular, so we are adding one more week to that. We are not proposing a fee increase to group lessons based on our competition, and although we've seen it grow back up, we still aren't at where we'd like to be with that. We are proposing to reduce hours just based on mainly usage and weather. 2 weeks at the start of the season and about a month at the end of the season, so basically through October. So 2 hours at the beginning of the day and 2 hours at the end of the day during this time frame. We also plan to reach out and partner with local schools for class instruction and range usage. The Centennial Activity Center. This is our home for a senior and active adult programming and our STAR membership. The center is obviously subsidized in order to provide affordable recreation opportunities to seniors and the active adults in our community. New last fall, as you probably remember, we started the independent contractor relationship at this facility with the Brickton Arts Center. And it has proven to be very popular and is included in this proposed budget again. We do continue to see growth and participation with creative offerings, but there's, of course, some unavoidable operational expenses. Prior to 2014, and this is kind of when you see this change a little bit, there were some of the expenses that we realized during the budget process were not properly allocated to the activity center. And so we decided to put them in there. So that's kind of where you see this happening here. And then this is where you see our excellent programming team adding new and innovative programs. And then you see it continue to improve with the Brickton as well as the new program opportunities. We're pretty excited to see this year-end estimate. When you're looking back at 2015, it's pretty amazing the change that we've seen there. So we list a few new programs, just as we have with the other slides, a new fitness format, some new extended travel opportunities, and more new Brickton classes and camps. And next year, the center is celebrating its 40th anniversary, so you see some fun events and activities planned for next year. The Brickton program, I just wanted to mention that it's, I know we've talked about this, but it's been very beneficial to the activity center, that they maximize space during the daytime, evenings, and weekends for classes, private lessons, birthday parties, and group outings that sometimes otherwise were not being used. So it's proven to be a really fantastic partnership. Just as an example, in 2019, we've exceeded our year-to-date estimates and currently at $20,000 in net surplus just from Brickton. And based on the current projections, programming is seeing a 24% increase in net surplus from 2019 and a 58% increase over 2018. So excellent news. We are proposing a 2.1%, which is a dollar increase to some of the specialty fitness classes. We're not proposing an increase to our membership based on our market research. We're still one of the highest for senior center type facility. The batting cages. Just to point out, here is where we started our partnership with Parkridge Youth Baseball. So they certainly helped us out with the arrangement that we've agreed to. This goes up and down based on really just the expenses and the things that happen in the facility. This year, there was also some winter storm damage here, and that repairs pushed back the opening for several weeks. While Paderma covered the claim, we still had the deductible, which is directly related to this year-end estimate. Unfortunately, it doesn't appear that we're going to break even this year, but very close. We, of course, see this as a facility we continue to run and operate, and as long as we continue the relationship with youth baseball, we hope to break even or close to. Nature Center. The Nature Center budget includes its own tax levy as well as the operations of the prairie. The program area continues to see growth, but of course, as with the other facilities, there's increasing operational expenses. The swings up and down that you see and the actual net income here are most often related to staff. When we see staff come and go, the facility is very busy and full of programming, even as we have expanded to the other facility. When we see staff leave, our current staff most often have to take over and teach classes, and then that limits our ability to expand and do other things. So in 2015, right about here is when we hired our a new full-time position. In 2016, we saw some unexpected expenses. 2017 is when we expanded into Main Park in the summer. And then, unfortunately, in 2018, we lost 2 of our 3 IMRF positions, which resulted in staff having to scramble and try and teach everything themselves, and resulted in overtime. So we're now back at full staffing, right? As of today, I hope. And our year-end estimate is looking much more positive than last year. As I said, it's really a direct result of the staffing when we see some of these ups and downs. And we hope to continue to improve in 2020. Very strong team of individuals at the Nature Center. Very passionate, and unfortunately with so many part-time positions, we're kind of a stepping stone, and they end up getting a full-time position at another Nature Center. So we train them well.
And they go to really great locations.
Yeah.
We lose them to Botanic Gardens, the Field Museum, other areas like that.
So a couple of the new programs we've talked about and are included in the budget for next year's Nature Preschool and the Toddler Tree School. And this budget area also includes the Nature Preschool Lunch Bench, the camps, and the wild ones. The only programs we're not proposing an increase in this area are the one-day classes. We just don't want to price ourselves out, even though it's a specialized area, and sometimes you can charge a little more. We'd really be competing against ourselves in this instance, we feel. We're going to continue the process for the Nature Preschool to become DCFS certified. And based on partially by that, we have to increase the staff to participant ratio. So we are proposing the fee increase over the recommended 1.9%, which will be 3.9% for residents. The 2020 budget also will see the full year of the competitive wage increase, similar to what I explained at the beginning of the presentation, that the Nature Center area also started in the fall of this year. And ending on a positive, the programming in this area seeing a 20% increase in net surplus since 2018 and 72% since 2010. So we've certainly expanded and added into every nook and cranny of that facility, as well as the main park rooms. Any questions or comments about Nature Center?
Just one comment, because as I've seen my child continue to grow since she started with, Nature's Terrific, went through 2 years of preschool, is now in the kindergarten capers, and I have to say I'm continually impressed with the things she comes home knowing, the creativity of the activities, and I think we've got something really special for our little kids there.
Yes, I would agree. And we're lucky that there's not that many park districts with nature centers, and we're very fortunate to have the space and the staff that we do that are so passionate about what they are passing along to the young minds. I believe that concludes the recreation portion, unless anyone wants to or ask anything else. Okay, thank you.
Who's the closer, right? Is it? Is it?
Thank you.
Thank you, April. Thank you, April. So we've looked at the general and the recreation funds. So when we combine those, we want to take a look at what we call our operating fund. So this is really the combination of the general fund and the recreation fund, and we take out debt service. So it really represents all of our operations. And as you can see, the expenses for our operations, the biggest part, program instructors, full-time salaries, wages, part-time wages, and employee benefits total up to 63% of our operating expenses. So this is really what's driving our budget. So when we talk about this, tonight is a high-level overview. April did a great job of detailing the different functional areas, but what we've tried to focus on are, really kind of what's driving the budget. And we separated out our employee compensation proposal because it really is such a big factor in our operations. So we had this chart in our presentation at our last meeting. I thought I would bring it back again, just to remind you how you can see historically the way the operating fund revenue exceeds expenses is what enables us to continue to invest in our capital assets. So the line represents the difference between the blue bar and the red bar and what would be available for investment in the capital fund. So in the 2019 budget, we estimated that we'd be able to transfer $250,000. But based on our current estimated projections, we're hoping to increase that to about $344,000. And the budget, as we've proposed it, anticipates we'd be able to transfer $350,000 after the 2020 fiscal year to the capital fund. So again, we look at our operating balance and the fund balance as a percentage of expenditures. In the operating fund as a whole, when we look at the combination of recreation and general fund without debt service, and we see that our fund balance is very stable over the last 5 years, and that
our retention level is right where we want it to be. So I talked about how the difference between our revenues and expenditures enables us to continue to invest in our assets, the capital assets. And we talked about the capital projects that we've identified as needs at our last board meeting. And I think sometimes we kind of want to have an understanding of what is how much should we be spending on capital? There's always more needs. So I just put this chart together to kind of show what, Commissioner Leach talked about the investment in capital and how that is not actually allocated to that cost center. But when we, if you were here for when we presented the financial audit in our comprehensive annual financial report, the very beginning pages kind of rolls everything together and shows on a system-wide basis what our financials look like. And part of that accounting is to show, our assets and liabilities, and our capital investments show up as capital assets, and they're depreciated over time over their useful lives. So in order to maintain the level of assets that we have, one way to look at how much would we spend is, are we at least investing as much as we're depreciating? So I thought it was useful to kind of see what our annual depreciation expense is on that, at that level. And you can see it is, in 2018, it was a little below 1.4 million. So April talked about the recommendations for fees that were incorporated into the proposed budget. And we've also incorporated the assumption that we include the inflationary increase to our tax levy allowed by the property tax limitation law. We've included an assumption for new property, so that as new property grows, if we add that the revenue associated with the taxes on that new property, that's not increasing anyone's tax bill. There's a change in the annual debt service and the CPI increase of amounts of the 1.9% amounts to about $100,000. So the total proposed dollar amount that's incorporated into this budget is a little over $200,000. And the estimated cost to the average taxpayer of that is $11.23. So we feel this modest increase is necessary to keep up with our known future expense increases and will still allow us to maintain our annual capital investments. So I did want to show that the board has not always elected to include this inflationary adjustment to the tax levy. In 2014, 2015, 2018, and 2019, we did not include these revenues in the tax levy, and the cumulative effect of that is that there's a little below 1.6 million that we could have been able to have to help fund our capital needs. Similarly, we know we have additional expenses that we're looking forward to with the impact of the minimum wage law that we talked about during the compensation presentation. One of the questions was the total cost, because we had looked at it in conjunction with proposed merit increases. So this chart shows what the amount would be for the current part-time and seasonal at the current wage levels if they moved up to the adult minimum wage in each year. So how those amounts would grow. And it does not include any merit or compression assumptions for a total of like the area under the blue of the blue here is about 900,000. So here I've shown you this is this $100,000 value of that 1.9% CPI adjustment, and what that will look like cumulatively over the next 8 years. And it would provide about 900,000, curiously enough, but further out, just that amount as it grows over the course of that time. That's the total that would be available. So we've looked at the historical revenue and expense trends, and I wanted to kind of put some projections together looking forward to see how the impact of these increased costs that we know about, how can we make sure that we're able to meet these challenges. So I made some assumptions. We used an inflation assumption of 1.5%. and applied that to the tax levy revenues annually from 2021 to 2024. The same amount for our supplies, contractual, utilities, insurance, miscellaneous, and program expenses. And then we've talked about this 3% employee compensation increase that we've proposed. It was a similar amount over the last several years. This market may change. It may not be the recommendation every year, but for projection purposes, it seemed like a reasonable assumption. So we applied that to the full-time, part-time salaries and wages and benefits and program instructors. And then when I looked back at historically, how much have our recreation revenues increased? So there's a variety of factors, as April so well explained. Some of it's due to program growth, some of it's changes in fees, but they kind of move up and down over and all. So I made the assumption that, well, if we're going to be increasing our salaries 3%, hopefully our program growth and participation and whatever fees are associated with that would equal about 3% too. And then I added in these additional increases due to the minimum wage that we have projected from our meeting in September. So doing so, I came up with these estimates for, well, we have our 2019, in the proposed budget, we have our 2019 estimate where we're projecting this $344,000 that we would be able to invest in the capital fund. And the 2020 proposed budget with the revenues assumptions that we've proposed, also about 350, and that we would be able to meet the capital projections that we talked about when we looked at that big projection sheet. How much are we annually going to fund from operations? We went up to 400,000. So this allows, these assumptions would allow that to continue, and we'd be able to meet what we had considered. So then I thought, well, what does it look like if we don't take this inflationary adjustment? So I assumed that our expenses would continue at the inflation rate, the supplies, utilities, contractual expenses, et cetera. We just left the tax rate not increasing. I did apply an estimated $70,000 annually for new property growth, because that's what we've been assuming, and that all the other assumptions remained the same. So I really just took out that inflationary CPI adjustment to the tax levy. So here you see that, this is the example in 2020. If we took that out now, because it's about 100,000, now we would project 250,000, not 100,000. And then the difference here between our revenues and expenses gets smaller than in the previous projection. The good news is that we're not negative. We should be able to manage to meet these increased expenses that we know are coming. However, it's going to really reduce what's available for capital investment. And when we put those projections together and what kind of capital fund balance and what we know our needs are on the capital front, we'll have to subtract out some of that 400 if we have a scenario this way with the 0% tax levy increase.
Can I ask, I missed what you were saying about the 250 on the right side. If you don't do the CPI.
I'm sorry. Yeah, so let me just go through this a little more closely. So the bars here, again, represent total revenues and expenses, and they are on this axis. So this is the, our operating budget is around 15 million. So you see that here? And then this axis is the amount of, goes along with the line, which is the amount available for capital investment. So if we don't take the that 100,000 CPI adjustment in the proposed budget for 2020, we had, so here, right, we're assuming that the budget assumes that we'll be able to transfer about 350,000.
Okay.
And then
150.
here it's 250. And then you can see that these are closer together. Again, the good news is that we're not negative in our, it's pretty balanced with our revenues and expenses, but we get way down that we're barely transferring anything to the capital fund. And if you remember the capital fund projections that we looked at, we're assuming that we're going to be able to hopefully generate about 400,000, I think beginning in 2021 on an annual basis.
To stay on top of upkeep of older buildings, roofs.
Exactly. All the things that we've already identified in the capital asset replacement plan, not considering some of the things that we know we haven't identified, as these lists seem to change every year.
Okay, and this is just if we don't take it this year, though. I mean, we could take
No,
it
this
another-
assumes that the projections assume it's not taken at all
Okay.
in any of those years.
And then projections on the slide before that you were showing,
Mhm.
is that assuming a 1.5 each year?
Yes. Yes, exactly. So, and we know that, what the actual scenario is going to be different than and either of these, but
Could be
yeah.
0.9 or.
Right. So then we also wanted to look at, well, where we are compared to our comparable park districts. So the bar on this graph here represents the park district tax rates for each of these communities. So our current tax rate, the 2018 levy year, which we're collecting here in 2019, is the 0.512%. And then the line shows, well, how does that compare to the community's overall tax bill? So that tax rate is about 5.2% of your overall tax bill. And you can see how that compares to other communities. There are some that are a little lower, but we're fairly in line, and there are some that are a lot higher. And our tax rate is also pretty fair compared to our surrounding communities. So then I wanted to look at, well, some of these communities, they have a very different tax base. So how does this relate to the equalized assessed value of the community? And what is their actual dollar amount of tax levy? So these bars represent the tax levy dollar amounts, and that is on this axis. And the line is what is the EAV comparable. So you can see our EAV is very comparable to Hoffman Estates, Mount Prospect, et cetera. And then lastly, I have prepared this next slide in response to some of the questions from last year's meeting. I have not had a chance to update the amounts because I had to dig through budgets and make some calculations to come up with these estimates. So I just used last year's data, but just to show you, because I think it's, a question that's relevant is how does our percentage break down between fees and revenues, or between taxes and fees and charges compared to these other comparable districts. And the reason they're not all 100% is because we've excluded capital revenues and we've excluded other revenues. So maybe some communities have a large TIF agreement or some other capital source that's actually included in their operations is the reason why they're not all 100%. But you can see that our budgeted percentage of total revenues from taxes is on the lower end. So once again, we're recommending that the 2019 tax levy incorporate the CPI adjustment. As we've discussed many times, the future significant capital funding needs rely on additional resources. Capturing the new growth and keeping pace with inflation is essential to managing our increasing costs. And just as a point of note, that does not require a truth and taxation hearing, meaning we are still below a 5% increase. And do we have any questions?
Well, thank you very much. Okay. So, now are we moving on to the approval of expenditures?
Financial reports.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Reports,
Yep,
yes.
back to you. You're not done yet.
Cindy, when are we going to take a break?
Maybe we're done with finance. Just finished finance.
Thank you, Commissioner Leduc. My written report begins on, looks like it's page 13 of the packet. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right.
Yes, Commissioner O'Donnell?
So, it's okay. So we're going to, our cash position is going to run well ahead now for the rest of the year, largely because some of the capital stuff that we had into. Right, okay. But then those requirements, for the most part, just they go into the next year, and we're going to spend that money. It's still available. It's still, yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
So it's a temporary benefit.
Yes. Although we are projecting, as we just discussed, that our operating expected year-end position would be about $100,000 better than what we had budgeted.
So that does contribute to the better cash position then.
Yes.
Okay, so
But it's
not-
largely the
it's largely,
difference,
but
the capital.
wow.
But there is, so yes, I think my point says that due to the timing of certain capital projects as well as better than budgeted operating performance to date. Yeah. And I would attribute, like we said, we're
more on
estimating.
the capital side than.
Yes.
That was what I was going at. Perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah, meaning, just the point that he's raising is that I would have went one step further just to say, what is the breakout of the 900,000? Is it 800 to
100?
Um,
In that paragraph you just cited, it's a budget expectations by approximately 900,000
Mhm.
due to changes in timing of certain capital projects as well as better than expected claims and operating performance. So the breakout between the two.
I think we can expect it to be about that. Yeah. I haven't done the analysis. Yeah.
Just split the pie.
That's how I would. I don't know if it's exactly that right at this moment, but
Well, yeah,
Yes.
that's what I'm saying. The pie, the magnitude,
Yes.
to use a fancy word,
Yes.
is 900. So out
Yes.
of that, how much is
Approximate-
capital versus how much is operating.
approximately 100 operating to approximately 800
So
capital.
that is the number.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Any other questions? All right. On to the monthly report by funds.
Sure. So in my written report, I've highlighted the information in the monthly report by funds, and we talked about our better than expected, or well, our good operating performance, and I don't have anything else to add related to that. If anyone has any specific questions on the fund reports, I'd be happy to address them.
All right. So I guess on to approval expenditures. Should I do the motion?
Yes, please.
All right. I move to approve for payment vouchers in the total amount of $650,546.84. And if you want to see the,
Second.
I was gonna say page 15 of our packet has the info for that. Superintendent DeAngelis, anything?
I don't have anything to highlight unless anyone has any questions.
Separate report.
It is. Well, it's
Separate email.
the detail is posted on the website, and I did distribute it this morning of what is included in those vouchers. But I think perhaps what Commissioner Leduc's referring to is on the treasurer's report on page 15. It does show a breakdown by fund of the total voucher amounts.
Any questions?
Of course, Commissioner Leduc has already scrubbed all the detail.
I emailed my questions.
That's right.
Yes.
I will say, yeah, Commissioner Grau has asked me a couple questions, which I will get back to her on.
All right. Then call the vote.
Commissioner Grau,
Yes.
Commissioner Leduc,
Yes.
Commissioner Leach,
Yes.
O'Donnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Tuttle,
Aye.
Commissioner Coyne, Commissioner Harrington.
All right. And now, final part of this, adoption of ordinance number 19-6. So I move to adopt ordinance number 19-6, an ordinance authorizing the sale of used personal property owned by the Park Ridge Park District.
Second.
Superintendent DeAngelis, any comments?
Sure. This is a resolution authorizing disposal of IT property. So these are things that are either obsolete or outdated, or we have no need for them any longer. Most of them, I believe, will be recycled. We just need the board's approval because we don't want to. This is a transparency issue of what we're doing with the public property. And if there is any opportunity for selling them, we will explore that. But I believe IT manager O'Leary has indicated that most of it would be recycled.
Any commissioner comments or questions? All right, hearing none, call the vote.
Commissioner Leduc,
Yes.
Commissioner Leach,
Yes.
Commissioner O'Donnell,
Yes.
Commissioner Tuttle, Commissioner Coyne, Commissioner Grau,
Yes.
Commissioner Harrington.
Okay. I've been asked if we could take a break, so I'm wondering if we could just take a break and regather here at 1:45. Is that all right? At 8:46. And moving on to recreation.
Okay, so do I have the floor?
You do. Speak into the microphone.
And I pass the floor over to Superintendent Armour.
My report starts on page 29. There's a lot of highlights. I'll keep my report short, but the Oktoberfest was another great event. There's also the variety show at the Activity Center was this month. This also obviously goes over all of the program participation and membership information. There's also a brief highlight of some of our summer statistics at the aquatics facilities, but Ethan will be back to give a full report on that. I think either next month or early December, maybe. Yeah. But I'd be happy to answer any questions about the report specifically.
I do have a question.
Sure.
Wasn't that September 14th yoga, like, was that the fundraiser one?
Yes.
So it wasn't really free. Suggest a donation, but you could be free. And are we doing that one this weekend or no? Oh, the 12th.
Yeah, it was freezing.
Good. I missed it.
Yeah.
Nobody
We said maybe we'll skip the October ones in the
Including me.
future, do something
Yeah,
inside
not
instead.
October. Not October.
Anybody else? I had one. On the Oktoberfest, obviously the weather was something less than ideal.
Mhm.
So do you have any kind of a glimpse as to what they did, financial numbers, revenues, expenses?
I did ask, and they don't have all of the numbers in yet and all the bills submitted, but it looks like we're going to about break even for that event.
So it's pretty consistent then with prior years, even with the crummy weather. It's just
Yeah, the crowd was steady. It definitely people didn't stay, I don't think, as long as they did last year. And it was a little rough, I think, on the participants also because they couldn't really use the grassy area. So it was,
It was a mess.
how it was set up wasn't as ideal conditions, but that's what you deal with outdoor events.
okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay, I turn it back to Commissioner Grau.
Or Commissioner Leach.
With that introduction and segue, I will turn it over to Superintendent Wolf for the Building and Grounds report.
Thank you. My report is on page 38. I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
The only thing I wanted to mention was, once again, on another hat I wear for volunteering, I thought the staff did another great job of helping about 800 kids, boys and girls, enjoy a homecoming festivity. And I know that takes a lot of work on your staff for those big events, but I know the public was very happy and complimentary.
Great. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? I'll turn it. Oh, I got a motion. Approval of change order 2, Centennial Activity Center roof replacement bid. In relation to the Centennial Activity Center roof replacement bid, I move in accordance with Section 33E9 of the Illinois Public Contracts Act that the president determine in writing that change order number 2 with Ridderford Roofing Company in the amount not to exceed $25,933 and is in the best interest of the Park District and is authorized by law, and that such written determination be provided by the president to the executive director, who shall then execute and deliver the change order. Do I have a second? Second? Open for discussion. First, let's hear from Superintendent Wolf again.
Yes, as you may recall, at the last meeting, we had a change order 1 with the Centennial Activity Center roof. As described at that point, we had anticipated a change order, a large change order due to temporary utilities. This is essentially the same change order. It's just the other half of that. After the last meeting, when the board approved the change order 1, my request was to approve our half of the change order. After that, a discussion ensued with the engineer on the project where they had indicated that they were unwilling to pay directly to the contractor their portion that they had agreed to, but preferred that they passed it through us as a reimbursement. I agreed, understanding that it had no additional financial impact to the Park District, but insisted that I have a check in hand before I even requested the board approve this. As such, a check was delivered to me yesterday, and I provided it to our finance department for deposit. So this is really a procedural thing. Memo is on page 39 if you care to see that, or if you have any other questions.
Other comments? Go ahead.
Why did they ask to have it handled that way?
There were said that it was not typical procedure for them to pay contractors that had agreements with us directly, and that they just preferred to work it under our agreement. So that maybe, and they didn't say all this, but that was their procedure. I would anticipate that because they don't have any contracts or agreements with them, but rather we do, and we have agreements with them. So
Okay, so now I think I understand. 'Cause when I read your report, I did not understand. So let me make sure I got it.
Sure.
Okay, so we have authorized and we paid the whole thing, and essentially they're reimbursing us. It's not exactly how it's being handled, but essentially that's what it is.
essentially, we have now authorized the full amount, and when it's charged back to us by the contractor, we will be paying the full amount. The engineer has already paid their portion of it in advance because I insisted upon it.
That's why it doesn't have a budget impact, because I didn't get that when I read your report.
Correct.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
No questions, concerns? Call the vote, Mary?
Sure. Commissioner Leach?
Yes.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Yes.
Commissioner Tuttle? Commissioner Coin? Commissioner Grau?
Yes.
Commissioner Leduc?
Yes.
Commissioner Harrington?
Commissioner Grau.
All right. I have nothing under policy, so we'll move to Commissioner Coin for intergovernmental.
We're having a meeting tomorrow morning, 9:30, to talk about sustainability issues throughout the city.
The task force. I will not. Okay. Do we have any communications and correspondence? Do we have any new business? Okay. Move to close meeting. You want to make a motion?
Sure. I move to adjourn to closed session for the purpose to discuss matters pertaining to employment, discipline, performance, compensation, and/or dismissal of one or more specific employees to Park District per 2C1. We'll reconvene to the regular board meeting to adjourn the meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner O'Donnell?
Yes.
Commissioner Tuttle?
Yes.
Commissioner Coin? Commissioner Grau?
Yes.
Commissioner Leduc? Commissioner Leach?
Yes.
Commissioner Harrington?
I'm reconvening the regular board meeting of Thursday, October 17th at 9:35 p.m. I move to adjourn the meeting of, oh, second. You have to? I move to adjourn the meeting of the Board of Park Commissioners. Voice vote? All in favor? Aye. All opposed?